Today in the EU, what will happen to the EU's 119 pending legislative files? After the European Parliament elections in June, the fate of 119 unfinished legislative files hangs in the balance. The new Parliament must decide whether and how to address these pending issues. This decision is expected to fuel political debates and shape the direction of EU policymaking in the upcoming term, as indicated by recent polls. But are all these files to be affected? I am Evikiori, and this is Today in the EU. To look into the fate of the unfinished files, we are joined by Max Girera. We heard that you've been working on this very interesting analysis of the unfinished business of the now former European Parliament. And of course, we had to pick on this. How come you decided to dig into this?
Well, of course, we have elections in June, so I thought it would be interesting to see all the files that the next parliament will inherit and why, what is the ratio of files that are ready to negotiate with the council or the files that didn't even make it through the committee vote. Yeah, especially seeing exactly which policy files will have to be taken over by the next generation of MEPs.
How many files are we talking about? Why are all these files unfinished? Maybe you can tell us a bit about the process and the delays as well.
Here we're talking about specifically 119 files. However, here we have a wide variety of reasons why the files are in this list. To be very honest, 56 files are in this list because the council hasn't been able to reach a position on it. So 56 of these files already have an agreement within the parliament, and now the parliament is negotiating with the council. But because the council often cannot agree on very contentious laws, the file is also in the pending list of the parliament, because ultimately the parliament, when there's an agreement through trialogue, the parliament also needs to ratify. So until this ratification vote happens, this confirmation vote happens, the file isn't pending. So examples of this could be the child sexual abuse material regulation, which isn't pending.
Max, before we get to the specific files, maybe it's worth explaining to our listeners the process to tick all the boxes for a file and legislation.
So there's several steps in the parliament. So first of all, there's the so-called preparatory phase. That's when the commission has proposed a new law, and then this reaches the parliament. It gets assigned to a committee, and then this committee needs to assign it to a rapporteur. The rapporteur is the person that, manages this file and leads the negotiations and, creates the draft report of the law that then it's submitted to committee vote. And then when it passes committee vote, this report then goes to plenary vote. Because in the committee, it's just some MEPs voting on it, representing the different political factions. And then this goes to plenary where all MEPs get their say on whether they approve or not. When the council reaches also their position, their negotiating position, then we go on trialogues.
And what happens after the trialogue?
There's when the parliament and the council at some point reach some sort of compromise. And then when there's an agreement, the trialogue agreement, it goes back to either to both the council and the parliament to be formally approved. Here, usually for the council, it's more of a formal approval. It just goes to any configuration, the earliest configuration of the council. So we could have, for example, the AI Act being ratified, let's say, by the fisheries ministerial, just like automatically item A on the agenda. But then for the parliament, it's more contentious because it has happened in the past that, for example, a file comes back. Like with the Migration Pact, we were not sure whether is it going to pass, is it not, because it could be that, not of the whole of the plenary approves. That's more like the general way it works. Nothing special, nothing new here.
Now, besides the council, are there any other reasons that delay the process?
Well, there's another main reason, which is the commission proposal. In many cases, the commission proposal came in very late. So the parliament didn't have enough time. And this can happen either because the proposal just simply came late as it was, because the idea to make it came later on by the parliament, for example, requested the commission to, elaborate a new proposal. Or sometimes it can be because the drafting of the proposal took longer than expected and was constantly delayed because of backlash, for example, from civil society organizations. And then, of course, the other reason can be because within the parliament, different political groups cannot agree on a position, so negotiations take very long.
Is there a possibility for these files to be binned away, or is everything passing to the next mandate?
They don't get binned at all. They just get frozen in this unfinished list for the moment. And then what happens is that with the first plenary session happening the 16th of July after the elections, when, of course, all the presidents of the groups, the president of the parliament, when all these top jobs have been sorted out, also the committee chairmanship. So when the whole new structure of the parliament is agreed on, then the conference of presidents, which is with the parliament president and the president of all political groups, then decides which files to continue working in or not. Traditionally, they keep working on all of them. So that's what we should be expecting.
Now that we've clarified all the procedure explanation and how files become legislations, we can focus on the actual files. So what is left?
Well, so as I was saying, there's 56 files that, it's not up to the parliament, it's rather up to the council to either finish their own negotiating position or for the parliament to be working again so that parliament and council can negotiate a final agreement. But then there's other cases. We have files that, as I was saying, they're in the preparatory phase. This means that they got to the parliament and now, because everything's frozen, they cannot be assigned to a rapporteur or they've been already assigned to a rapporteur, but they cannot be negotiated in committee.
So they're still in the very initial stage?
Yeah, some of them. So 52 files are either in the preparatory phase and committee draft reports. What does this mean in practice? This means that 56 files, the ones that have been already agreed by the plenary, will not be able to be influenced by the next.
Okay, so it's already sort of sealed, the deal.
It's sealed. The only thing that could happen is that then when there's a final agreement with the council, when it comes back to plenary, the MEPs vote against it. That could happen especially because we're going to have a rearrangement of political forces in the European Parliament. So in very contentious issues such as agriculture files or animal welfare laws, if we have a blocking right-wing majority, then we could see this happening in the plenary. But 56 of these files, they cannot be touched anymore. They've been agreed. However, there's around more than 60 files that can be influenced.
Do we have an example of a file like this, a file in the preparatory phase?
As an example of this file that is in preparatory phase, we have this foreign agents law, sort of. So basically, it's this lobby transparency register for foreign-funded organizations. This was a law that has been pushed for due to, Russian interference or foreign interference.
This law was proposed by Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen as a part of the Defense of Democracy package.
We need to better shield ourselves from malign interference. And this is why we will present a Defense of Democracy Pact. It will bring forward covert foreign influence. It will shed the light on shady.
And then what happened here is that it got delayed over and over again because it's very contemptuous. So, for example, civil society organizations would push back against it, or they criticize that the European Commission didn't do a proper assessment. So even though it had to be published in spring 2023, it got delayed and it didn't get proposed until December 2023. So that's why, for example, now this file is in pending because it just got to the parliament too late.
Yeah.
This file now is in the preparatory phase. They assigned it to a rapporteur that made a grand announcement, I'm the rapporteur for this file. But of course, this happened when the parliament was not able to work on it anymore. So now it's frozen. But then this MEP, Guy Lavocat from Renaissance, he's not even in the lists anymore. So this means that, for example, this file will need to be reassigned.
From these 119 files, if you were to select the most important ones, which files would those be?
There's an interesting one, the new genomic techniques. It's a very contemptuous file, basically about how the EU regulates genetically modified crops. So far, it was completely banned, and now, they're opening the door to these new genomic techniques, but it's super contemptuous, and it really could be, even though this file has already been agreed on, the parliament position, it could be that afterwards, with the new composition of the parliament, it gets rejected, Another one, the one that I was talking about, the transparency register for foreign-funded actors harmonized across the EU, I think it's also very important, very relevant. Then we have preventing plastic pellets losses. So this is basically regulating how companies that deal with plastic pellets, which is these little balls of plastic that sometimes you find in the beach, because of, pellet losses from ships, for example, how companies that deal with this material are regulated. Another interesting one, because it would complement the migration pact that we recently passed, is this EU talent pool that it's called informally the Tinder, EU's Tinder for migrants.
They describe it as a Tinder function, but it's a matching function, that's for sure. And if you would like to have a sense of what it would look like, you can go into the EURES platform.
Said the EU's Home Affairs Chief, Ylva Johansson.
So basically, it's this platform that would connect job seekers outside of the EU with recruiters. With job opportunities here in the EU for skilled workers and so on. This one is already in committee, but frozen. Then we have the revision of the EU animal transport rules. It's the only proposal left from a long-awaited package to reform the whole bloc's animal welfare rules. So it's pretty important. So the Parliament has not yet approved its position on the dossier. But the rapporteur is quite likely to get re-elected. So, we'll have the same MEP. We'll have Daniel Buda from the European People's Party also managing this dossier, with a potential shift of the Parliament towards the right and the loss of the Green co-rapporteur, because the Green co-rapporteur, it's probably likely that it won't get elected.
Yeah.
So with the loss of this co-rapporteur and with whoever might succeed this co-rapporteur, which might not be a Green, MEPs could push for lowering some of the proposed animal welfare provisions. This is the type of example where we see that, highly contemptuous laws, because of the Parliament shifting, and maybe some MEPs not being in the Parliament again, and then the rapporteurships having to be reassigned, it's where we see that this could influence legislation, especially in the 60-plus files that have not passed through plenary vote, which are still subject to change.
Now, some of these files are quite sensitive, especially the ones coming from the LIBE committee, and particularly important as well, like the anti-smuggling, sexual abuse of children, and anything on AI. Do you see them coming back to the priorities of the upcoming parliamentary mandate, or?
I think the priorities will change of the parliament, because the priorities will depend on what is agreed among the political groups and with the new commission.
Yeah. So
now with the new elections, with whoever the parliament needs to confirm as commission president, perhaps Ursula von der Leyen, perhaps not, we'll have to see. This commission president, together with the groups, will need to form this new list of priorities. There's even some talks of having a written coalition agreement, because right now political groups really don't trust each other or don't trust von der Leyen also. So if they would need to appoint her again, there would be a new set of priorities that are put in place. I think these laws that are impending, though, would still be important, would still be part of the legislative process, and they would be finished, but it would not be the highest of the agenda. The highest of the agenda will have whatever comes after the new commission is appointed, and we'll see what the new commission wants to do. So these are more leftovers from the last term that the parliament will keep working on the background, I believe. It won't be the big star files. I would expect, for example, the big star files next term will be some sort of industry deal or some sort of competitiveness reform law.
And to wrap this up, what can we expect?
Traditionally, all these files will be worked on next term, but who knows? It could be that some of them are dropped. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that on the next Conference of Presidents, what they decide. We'll keep you posted, of course, and we'll keep you posted on how all these files unfold. For the next parliament, as we were talking, I think one of the main priorities next to the Commission will be, this competitiveness against other global actors.
Thank you, Max, for breaking down for us the process and the unfinished business of the European Parliament. I am Evi Chiori, and this was Euractiv's Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed yet or followed us, you can find us on all streaming platforms. Also, make sure to leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Your reviews really help us to spread the word about our work. This episode was produced by Miriam Sáenz de Tejada, Nicoleta Yonte, and myself. Thank you for tuning in, and until tomorrow morning. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.